I definitely underestimated how much of a challenge this was going to be. Hello, it's Thursday. So do you remember this super funny joke? Like a 100-piece challenge. Should we? No. No. But maybe? Well, we did it. And by we, I am of course referring to myself and my favourite collab partner, Leigh from Skein Spider. If for some reason you aren't familiar with her yet, she is a fellow Australian crochet channel and her videos cover everything from patterns, tips and tricks, through to fun crochet challenges too. This project did take place over a number of weeks and we did initially establish a criteria. I, of course, being the person that I am, left everything to the last minute, caught the flu, and watched that criteria fly out the window. Here's what you need to know from my video today. So 1. Between us, we designed 41 unique mandatory pieces. These were a mix of larger, more complex pieces, mid-sized, more basic shapes, and pieces that had to incorporate either a specialty stitch or a specialty yarn. 2. We were allowed to design additional crochet pieces based on what we needed, and we were allowed to add non-crochet elements to our work as well. They would still count as part of our 100 pieces. 3. Our finished creation had to be made up of 100 pieces total. Now, those 100 pieces had to include at least one of each of the 41 mandatory pieces, but the rest were kind of up to us. So this is just a quick note from the future. Okay guys, I have the flu for most of this video, and for some reason I refuse to admit it for most of this video. So if you're noticing something off with the vibe or the energy, it's just that I'm a stubborn 33-year-old who never learned how to take a sick day. That's all. Alright, so I've worked up the first batch of pieces. Some of them are from Leigh and some of them are mine. I have made them in whatever scrap colour I had available to me, which honestly isn't really helping with this process. I just need to get a feel for the different shapes that we had that we're working with, you know? And I actually think it's pretty obvious at this point that we're both feeling a little bit planty about it. There's just a lot of things that could be leaves, succulents, or flowers. We did talk briefly about like terrariums or aquariums for this project, so I do think that has set us both on a path. But if I'm honest, I am having trouble sinking my teeth in properly to the designing. I think I'm just a very creature-focused designer, and having all of these in different colors isn't really helping me because I'm having a hard time looking at these little bits and working out what's needed to bring them all together into one thing. But this is the puzzle we have ahead of us. Now, this isn't even all of the pieces, but I made a whole bunch of them just to sort of get us started. And what I'm noticing straight away is we are lacking any of the like base foundational pieces that we would normally use to attach some of the more decorative pieces to. So if I divide this up into what's clearly plant, that could be a flipper of some kind. That's a vine, got a leaf. That just looks like a little mushroom to me. And you'll kind of see what I mean there. A lot of these pieces, they just sort of hit decoration notes instead of as like a foundation or a base piece. I think this has to be our most major piece. It's definitely like the largest and sort of gives the most foundation vibe of the pieces that we have here. It could be maybe the trunk of a tree. You'd like build off it with some branches or something. I think what I need to do is just sit down with my sketch pad and just sort of generate some ideas using some of these base shapes. I started teasing at the tree idea, thinking about things like Torterra, where the gardenscape is on the back of some kind of creature. And for a while I thought I was going to try and incorporate a tortoise as the base, but it would have used up basically all of my personal design pieces, and that's when I finally hit upon an idea. Bagworms. Have you seen them? Do you know about the bagworms? So what they are is they're these little like beetles or worm type creatures who build like basically entire log cabins on their backs for either like camouflage or it's some sort of survival instinct, but it looks really, really cool. So I'm thinking that this is no longer a tree trunk and that this is now my worm. So given the pieces that I have access to so far, I'm not going to try and go for like a distinctive like log cabin type of thing, but I'm thinking maybe like a large garden ball covered with like bits of plants and debris that's clearly sort of been built up in the same kind of way actually has some potential. So in my mind, this particular bagworm exists in like a mystical fairy forest, and he uses the magical garden ball on his back to attract all kinds of pollinators. I'm even thinking that I'm going to butcher up one of the strands of LED lights that I sometimes use on the shelves behind me, and we'll just see if we can use some lights to add just a little bit more dimension to this. I didn't want to just let chaos descend here, so I made a rough digital sketch using a photo of my yarn wool as a paint palette so I could colour match to real life. I I took a photo of my pencil sketch, the yarn I knew I wanted, and just a general photo of my available colours. Then I used the colour picker to fill in the colours I knew. I knew the colour palette I wanted for the garden ball straight away: blue-green, blue-purple and blue-grey. But I didn't know what colour to make the main snail. I thought maybe yellow for the snail, but digitally adjusting the hue helped guide me to a slightly more beige tone. I could then use the colour selector to show me which of my available yarns would get me closest to the colour I wanted. It was a lot of yarn, but we are making a lot of pieces. And I really liked this idea because it would give me the chance to use up some of these little plant bits in a way that still had some structure to it, while still making a creature. So I started by remaking the pieces I knew would form my worm in the right colours. There was the tree trunk that would be his body, and then a couple of eye stalks, both in a pale, sluggy cream colour. The main structure for his garden ball was going to be one of my custom pieces, as I didn't want to burden Leigh with the challenge of a giant orb. Next, I had my rough colour map, so I began producing each of the mandatory patterns in roughly the right colour. I did try to build a kind of sensible form language, with certain colours being flowers or petals, others being stems and leaves, and others being the more generic shapes that I didn't necessarily want to highlight as much. I got through all the complex pieces and all the basic shapes, but things got interesting when I got to the specialty yarn pieces. Group B done, one of each, except for two of that piece there, because I think it's going to be really useful. Which leaves me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 18, 19, 20, 21. So that leaves me with 21 pieces down, 79 to go. Part C calls for specialty yarns. So I have some sparkle yarn here. And I have some, I think it's called like FOMO. It's like mohair of some sort that I've not used before, but I had some. And I think it kind of goes with my colour story. So those are my specialty yarns, and hopefully I can work out how to use this stuff. It's very, very fine and fuzzy. Yeah. Now, anyone who saw the yarn video from last week knows that I had a horrible time with that mohair. I was actually shooting both of these videos at the same time, so I hadn't yet had the benefit of your advice. Look, okay, I was going to use mohair. I made a genuine attempt. It's too hard. I'm quitting this. I'm not going to be using it anymore. Never fear, I will be trying to work with this yarn again in future, but for now I stuck with the sparkle yarn. So these are all of my pieces so far. I think we've hit 30 or 40 of them at this point. Really liking how the colours are turning out. Okay, so while I was working on all of these pieces, I realised that I'd actually missed two major pieces from the available patterns, and they were two of Leigh's Group A pieces. So the first one was this pointy cone type shape. It's got like stacked tiers to it. And the second was this kind of like bomby knocker type of deal, which I have done stripy because honestly the intrusive thoughts won. So now I'm thinking that I need to adjust my like garden ball idea to more of a garden shell, and this can be like the top part of the spiral. Also, as I was just making these pieces, I realized how many kind of mid-sized, chunky foundation type pieces there actually were in this mix that are going to add a lot of bulk to it. So I'm going to need to be careful to try and keep that the main piece that I'm making, that main ball, first of all proportionate with the size of our worm, who isn't honestly that big in terms of the scale of some of the other pieces we have to work with, but also so that like all of these other sort of larger mid-sized pieces kind of also work in with it. I definitely underestimated how much of a challenge this is going to be. So yeah, as I mentioned, I have the snail base here in its proper colours. Hopefully this is lit well enough because I don't have the energy to change the shot. I'm so sorry if you can't see this clearly. And I've made him a couple of eyes, and I hopefully he doesn't hate me for making that one of my pieces, because it's just such a specifically, distinctly creature piece in what is otherwise a garden of flowers. So I'm really sorry about that. Right, so originally I was planning on like manipulating this and forming like a mouth out of it with the eyes up here, which is kind of like goofy looking, but not too strange. But then the more I play with these pieces, the more I think of what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stick these to the front, which gives me just a little bit more length down the back, because having the eyes up on top was really like cutting the snail short. And then to cover these like rough edges at the front, I think I'm going to remake some of these specific leaf pieces and just use them to like tuck away my edges. I've got a plan. I have a plan and I think it's going to work. So the next thing I actually have to do is the foundation for what's going to stick onto his back. So I waited until now to build that main foundation piece, because I really need to get a feel for how much surface area 80 to 90 of my pieces will cover. I did make some of them with the intention that they will go directly onto the snail himself, which should chew through maybe a dozen of the pieces, but really the garden ball is going to have to carry the bulk of that burden. And so getting some idea for how much area all of this is going to need was kind of an important intermediary step. Still not super clear on what shape that should be, but hopefully we'll work it out. So with the foundation pieces made, I wanted to do a test run with the lights. These ones are on little sticks, which I'm hoping will stick out through the stitches easily and bring a little dimension to him. I had to like wiggle them around a lot to get them through, and spacing might be an issue, so I don't really know where in the process to do this, but I think that it's gonna work. The time had come to assemble. I needed to make a beeline for the fastest road to a completed creation. I started by reconceiving the base snail. I wanted it carrying as many pieces as I could without it appearing crowded. I used a bunch of simpler shapes to create a bunch of nipply feet and a couple of other pieces to disguise my edges. Nipply. That is now 26 pieces attached. Not including all the pins. Pins don't count as pieces. I might be putting some more of these little blisters around the edge, but I have to start working on the shell first, just to see how much room that takes up. Yeah. The shell was going to be a more difficult freeform type of piece. Having threaded the eyes through the weave of the shell pieces, I ended up making this little pocket to hold the battery pack. I needed to make sure that I could still access it to change the batteries in future, as well as like the on-off switch. And I tucked that away inside the shell so that it was not going to be visible on the finished snail. With the base shell assembled, I started blocking out the garden on top of it. That 6-petaled flower on top was nearly an umbrella, but I did flip it at the last moment, and I'm really glad that I did. I then covered the mid-sized lump in vines, and pinned and sewed all the foundation pieces onto the snail. It was really starting to come together. I wrapped my root pieces around the base, helping to disguise some of those edges and to tuck away that battery pocket. There were still several really obvious gaps in the garden and I was quickly running out of pieces, so I filled them in with warts, a bunch of leaves, more warts, a long strand of loops that felt like cheating but still only counts as one, and these spiral pieces that might actually be my favourite piece from the whole challenge. Finally, I attached 2 little butterflies. And done. So before I show you him in more detail, I do just want to say that I have had a sneak peek of what Leigh ended up making, and it is absolutely magical. So as a reminder, you can see what Leigh came up with and how she got there by going on over to Skein Spider. And I would just like to add that Leigh really was the driving force behind this challenge, so if you liked this video at all, please go say thank you in her comment section and leave her a like. And finally, here is my finished bagworm inspired 100-piece challenge. I got a bit vague on the rules by the end, but if Leigh can forgive me for that, I'm sure all of you can as well. I'm particularly pleased with how I handled the lights and hiding the battery pack while still being able to access it. I've never done anything like that before. I do wish I could have taken my time to more deliberately place various elements instead of plonking things down and just trying to fill the spaces. But I do still really love him though. I'm leaning towards Hugo for a name, but I will take suggestions in the comments. Okay, that's it for this week. Bye!